ER customer since 2011.
All right, so we'll go into some training opportunities. This is, go one slide back. Thanks, Roger. This is our training team. Tom Lewis was in Flower Mound, Texas, a few weeks ago, doing an on-site training. It's a good-looking bunch. Right now, we actually have a trainer, Mark Yaden, is up in Fort Greely, Alaska, which is basically the North Pole. So we made sure for him to tell Santa that we all are on the nice list. So we have lots of training opportunities at ER. We have regional training conferences, and we will be planning those for the year of 2016 in the coming weeks. So keep tuned for where we'll be headed. Those are bigger training sessions that anyone can attend. And then we have on-site training, so if you want something more specific for your department. And then we also do online training, so you don't even have to leave your computer. And if you're interested in any of those opportunities, feel free to email training@emergencyreporting.com, and we will find out what would be the best option for you. And always make sure to come to Virtual Thursday since it's free, and we always have awesome guest presenters or strong trainers to teach you what you need to know. And then upcoming, we have regional training conferences. We have our last one of the year. We'll be in Monterey, California, December 7th through 9th. So this is next week. We're getting everything all prepped and ready for this. It's actually at the Presidio of Monterey, Army base in California. So we're excited for this. Mark Yaden and Tom Lewis will be training there. And if any of you will be attending, we're excited to see you. Where to find the latest info. So if you are logged into your system currently, if you go to the home page, at the very top, you'll see some notifications in bright red, or sorry, bright orange. I actually just posted one 15 minutes until Virtual Thursday. Our marketing team here is always striving to make sure that everyone's up to date on the latest system updates, any downtime we might face, anything like that, we make sure to post it here. It's a good go-to place if you have any questions or are wondering what's coming up. So make sure you check that often and check for upcoming trainings. And then as well as if you ever need help, you see the little life preserver, that's our support button, and feel free to call us any time of the day or send us an email and we'll get a ticket started and make sure we can get your problem with the system or anything like that figured out as soon as we can. And there's just more about news and announcements and how to suggest a feature in our system and contact support in our knowledge base. And also welcome, since Thanksgiving, our last Virtual Thursday, we didn't have one during the Thanksgiving week. We have 8 new customers, so welcome and thank you for joining the ER family. And from here, I'm going to let Roger take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. When Tom asked me to show some of the things we were doing in Avondale, I mentioned to him how using the emergency reporting over the past few years has helped our program move from what we call chaos to compliance. Looking back on it, in 2009, we had a staff of 7, and that was reduced to 3. We had obsolete computers. Our software and our data was a big challenge. So we really, when I look back on it, that's the best way to describe our program, was we were in chaos. So we were just trying to do the best we could with the limited amount of technology and the resources that we had. And in late 2011, we signed on with emergency reporting, and we started building our program. And in 2012, we basically started collecting data. We got iPads to use in the field, which made our data collection a lot easier and more accurate because we were obtaining information firsthand. And but we were kind of lost. We were trying to do the best we could based on what we thought we were doing and the right thing. And in 2013, the NFPA 1730 draft came out, and we kind of started using that draft version as a roadmap to compliance and how to get our program actively up and running and have the advantage of doing it in accordance with a national standard. And in 2015, we have 1730 is out now, and we're well on our way to being in compliance with that guideline. So we wanted to share some of the things and the challenges we went through, and hopefully you can learn from our mistakes and the good things that we did manage to do. And we're going to go over to our live account now and actually go through some of that process. But first, I want to talk just a minute about the community risk assessment. Like many of you, we're transitioning from fire prevention to community risk assessment. That seems to be the popular thing now, and it makes more sense because we all have limited resources. And then finally 1730 came out and it gave us that roadmap. So just a real quick summary of what 1730 says about that. And the first step toward the management of your risk in your community is based on your local needs and circumstances. Yeah, they realize that everybody's needs are different depending on local needs. The second thing is collect and analyze data to make decisions about programs and resources so that we can implement our community risk reduction plan. So that's one of the most difficult challenges, is actually collecting the data and getting in your database, and then once you have it in there, being able to get that data back out so you can analyze it to use it to help make good decisions. And that's where emergency reporting is a big advantage to the program that we was using in the past. And then thirdly, the conducting your community risk assessment, it's a practical data gathering and analyzing exercise intended to create community risk profiles. So let's talk for a minute about those profiles. If you look at 1730 as your roadmap for the profiles, it addresses building stock profiles, demographic, geographic profiles, your fire profile, your response profile, and things like that. And that's where emergency reporting can really help us manage that. So first of all, we would use the incidents module to bring up our statistics and to map them to get our fire profile. And then we would use in emergency reporting, we would go down and use their analytics module, the response analytics, to help us build a profile of our fire responses in our local jurisdiction. In our occupancy module, we would use for our building stock profile, our geographic profile, and if we set our zones up properly, we can also help use that for our demographic profile. And what we do in Avondale is we use our census tracts. And then the vision module actually gives us our hazard profile based on the data that we input to it. What is NFPA 1730? It's the standard for organization and deployment of fire prevention, inspection, and code enforcement, plan review, inspection, and public education operations to the public. That's a long title. We're just going to talk more about the fire code enforcement part of it today. Let me skip forward here. So what we're going to do is go to our live account today and talk about what we've done exactly in Avondale. So if you look at your occupancy module, the first recommendation we have is plan ahead, because if you put garbage in, you'll get garbage out, and that's what we had in our previous records management system. It was basically garbage because we hadn't done a good job and we hadn't planned ahead. And the main advantage that the occupancy module offers is that it gives us some flexibility to the setup, where we can set it up based on our local needs and our circumstances, because all of us are different. And then it also creates some flexibility to get our data back out. We call it the data ninja because we can slice and dice the data any way we want to. In the future, I was at a NFPA Smart Technology seminar a couple of weeks ago, and they basically talked about how the future is going to be based on evidence-based decision making, that pretty much all the decisions we make in the fire service are going to be based on data. So we have to have good, reliable, accurate data to make good decisions, and the term for that is evidence-based decision making. And then the other advantage that emergency reporting has is it provides us with visual data if you have the mapping integration. And that visual data is very important to our inspectors in the field who are using iPads. If they're in a area and they want to know what's going on around them, what buildings and what hazards they have that they may need to inspect, they can go to the mapping portion, and as we'll see here, and they can get visual data, and they call that being able to be street smart. So let's look at our grid in Avondale. We basically have 2,600 occupancies that we manage, and when we went to start building it, we started building with the categories and the subcategories. And the key thing to remember in the grid is any data that you get in the grid, you can switch to the map view and you can map it if you have the mapping integration module. Now when you run reports out of the reports module, you can put them into spreadsheets and you can use the data, but you can't really map them. So we place a high priority on the data and how we can slice and dice it in the grid, because we like to be able to map it, to visualize it. That helps us to do better reports for our chief and for our elected officials so that they can make better decisions. So that's why I would emphasize that you really look at your grid when you're building it with your community risk reduction program in mind. And then the other thing you can do is you can use advanced searches, and we'll do an example here in a minute. And then you can also download with the CSV download to a spreadsheet all this data also. And one of the first things you should do is set up a test facility. You'll see this top one here. It's called test facility, and that allows you to experiment if you're making a change or you think you want to set up part of your program or your inspection forms and things like that. Then you can use this test facility and not contaminate any of the data in your other areas. So let's actually look at we'll start over here on the left and work our way right. What we've done in Avondale is we've set up a categories and subcategories based on our local needs. And we started with the International Building Code classifications, occupancy classifications of the ABM, things like that. And then we started using the subcategories as the A1s, A2s, but then some of these we actually wanted to see differently. Like this A2, for example, we wanted to see the difference between dining restaurants, the larger restaurants, and nightclubs and others, for example. And because when we did our profile, our fire profile and our response profile, we identified restaurants, apartments, and schools as the prime locations for fires in Avondale. So we made those a high priority on our inspection and our fire prevention efforts. So we wanted to be able to break down dining and restaurants here. So let's look, for example, with the A2s are the larger restaurants because they have an occupant load over 50. So by just clicking on that one, we can immediately bring up and we can scroll down and we can see that we have 65 of those larger restaurants. And if we want to map those, we click on the switch to map view, and we can get a general visual view of where the larger restaurants are in our city. And if we switch over to satellite here, you can see that we have some primary, probably all of you have, where most of the business community is. Like this is the I-10 corridor to California, and so we have a corridor here, a corridor north and south here, and a corridor east and west up here where most of our businesses are and most of our restaurants are. And the center areas are mostly residential. So this is where our business community is in these primary business corridors. So as you zoom in, you can see this is one of the retail complexes in the corner of our city. You can see that there's a lot of restaurants right here in these two retail complexes. And as you zoom down through the corridor, you can see this Dysart Road corridor has a lot of restaurants also. So when we switch back to grid view, if we want to see the smaller restaurants, for example, then we go to the business occupancy. And these are the restaurants with the occupant load under 50. So they're smaller. You can see that we have 59 of those. So you can also switch to the map view. I have to flush that map there. And you can see where they're generally located. So again, these are high priority for us. So this allows us to slice and dice this data the way we want to prioritize restaurants. And we'll go back and look at some of the other categories that we've considered here. There's the A occupancies, and when we get into the B occupancies, for example, we want to see where the auto dealers are, where just the auto service repair are, and then a lot of the other things like dry cleaners, medical. We have a medical corridor, so there's a lot of medical offices, and we wanted to break those down into the different, whether it's eye care, imaging, dermatology, things like that, just to give us the flexibility to look at those specialties. So for example, if we look at auto dealers, we see that we have 26 of them. And we can see that the primary area that they're in is, this is called Auto Row along the interstate here. There's a lot of the car dealers. And this is important from a community risk reduction standpoint, in that the sales tax generated from the car dealers is a very important economic benefit to the city. So we want to make sure that those buildings get their inspections and maintain their fire systems. So again, those are a high priority, and that's why we've classified them down also. So go back to our grid and look again at some of the classifications we have. And again, this is customizable. If you don't want to look at this much detail, you can keep it very simple and very basic. You can customize it to your needs in your community. For example, city buildings, for example. I can see all the city buildings, and there's our city facilities, 88 city facilities. And you can switch to the map view, and you can get a general view of where they are. Going back to the grid view, another high priority we talked about was educational schools, because they seem to have a lot of fires. So we can scroll down and we can see we divided the educational into, I can look at all of them. I can break it down into colleges, maintenance facilities, elementaries, high schools, and I have more data than some people might want to have, because I just want to be able to have the flexibility to pull that data out in a specialized manner. So let's look real quick at schools. You can scroll down and see that we have 194 school buildings. And again, you can go to map view and see that they're fairly evenly distributed around the city. And we go back to the grid view and look at some of the other categories. I mean, now the geographical hazard ones I've added, but I haven't actually mapped them yet. This is something that came from our emergency planner that needs to know those things for the city emergency plan. So they'll be implemented in the future into emergency reporting. Then we have our hazardous occupancies, our industrial, institutional, mercantile, like all of you, you have a lot of businesses. So we like to be able to track, like how many dollar stores we have, how many convenience stores we have, how many convenience stores that do motor fuel dispensing, furniture stores, liquor stores,
Hey, Roger.
etc. Yes.
We did have one question from Brian Kelly. It says, did you set the icon for the OVAP score?
Did I set it? Oh, yes. Oh, I set it on the middle of the building. Let me look at stores here, for example. We'll go over and see this one. Now, what I do when I set them is I follow the example of Google Maps, since this is using Google Map integration, and I put it right over the location of that tenant or that store in the middle of it. Now, we didn't start that way. We originally put them out in the street, but then it was kind of a mess when you was trying to track where these buildings were in relation to each other. So we started moving them to right where the exact location is. And I'll show you on the mapping when we go back here. I'll show you in the mapping how that pays off. Matter of fact, we'll go down to apartments here real quick. Residential apartments, buildings, and this is a great example here. When you go over to the map view, every apartment building is individually has an individual OVAP score, and the reason we do that is when you're doing community risk assessment, it's done by building. So if you're doing it by complex, you're missing a lot of data. And this is 2 apartment complexes, for example, here. The green one is 2-story buildings, so it has a lower score than the apartment complex next door, which is yellow. It's a higher hazard because those are 3-story wood-framed apartments, which means they're more difficult to fight the fire in there. You need a ladder truck. More difficult for rescue, search and rescue, things like that. So appropriately, they have the higher hazard OVAP score. So you can see here by placing we'll do it flat here, by placing the icon directly on the middle of the building, it makes it much easier to manage when you're looking at the maps. So that's what we do, and that's what we found best. And if you see like Google Maps over here, this Channel Dental, they map right where their tenant suite is, the nail salon here. So I'm just trying to be consistent with Google Maps. So we'll go back to the grid here. And one other key thing that we started tracking, which is in 1730, is the critical infrastructure. And there's a category for that on the emergency reporting, but we wanted to identify them like here's APS versus cell phones versus SRP, which is another power one. So we can actually, like City Hall a couple of weeks ago, want to know how many cell sites do we have around the city. Well, I was able to just go right in here, click on cell sites, and tell them immediately there's 47 cell sites. And by the way, if you want to map that, we can give you a map of exactly where they're located at. So you can use the data not only for community risk and fire prevention, but you can also use it for economic development and share your data with some of the other departments in the city that may need that data, that don't have access to data like we do. So we'll scroll on down to, and then also the vacant one. This is one we found real useful back, especially back during the recession. Now a lot of these are starting to fill up. But what we did was we identified a category of vacant, and we wanted to know if it was a complex that was vacant, a shell building, a standalone building, or a tenant space. So from a firefighting standpoint, of course, we're concerned about standalone vacant buildings. We can see that we have 10 of them through the city. We want to make sure their property's secured so that people don't go in there and set fires. So we can immediately tell exactly where these vacant buildings are. Or if we go back to the grid, here's one that our economic development people are kind of interested in is we want to see vacant tenant spaces. And you can see we have 256 vacant tenant spaces. And if you look at that on a map, that seems like a lot, but when you look at a map, you can see that. We'll zoom in here on one complex. Back right before the recession, they built all these big buildings here, and then they've sat vacant for several years, and you can see all these blue ones here. Those are basically vacant suites. And so that, from an economic development standpoint, we have the square footage of all these and stuff, and if somebody calls and says, oh, we need a space of 5,000 square feet in the location, we can actually give them that kind of information also. So as these are filling up, and a lot of these are filling up now, then we just go in and when we get a business license request and enter the data and then get them into our risk and hazard analysis and inspection program. So as you go around the city, you can basically see where your vacant spaces are for managing those. Now, those don't require inspections, but it's good to know where those are. So now we'll go back up to all here and move across here on the IDs. What we're using as sensors at this time, the emergency reporting doesn't have a parent-child relationship on the buildings. What we're doing is using the street address numbers as our business ID, like this one's 10250. And if it has a suite number, then we use the street, then a dash and the suite number. And that's how we identify the ID number and make it easy. Now there's a benefit to that, like for example, if you want to do a college campus, for example, we'll show you that we have one college campus in town, and it's got 13 buildings. When you go over to the map view and look at it, you can see here's the campus, and each building is identified separately and has its own data with square footage and height and things like that. Inspections, we do all the inspections by building. But they're all tied together because they have the same street address. Now what we've done for complexes is we have one occupancy for a complex, and we'll look at that, for example, because they have a private fire hydrant system. We want to tie that private fire hydrant system to the complex. So you can go over to the fire protection systems, and you can see that they have a private fire water system. With this one has 2 loops, and it's connected to the campus. So when it comes time for the maintenance of that, we know who's actually responsible for the maintenance of the fire hydrant systems. And if you're in a retail complex, for example, the property management company takes care of the complex and the shell buildings, for example, but then each individual tenant takes care of their own system. So we had to figure out a way to assign responsibilities for inspections, fire code issues, fire protection system maintenance, things like that. So I'll go over to a retail complex here and show you a strip mall in a retail complex. Okay, this is a strip mall building, and when you go in to do an inspection, you can't write the tenants up for getting the sprinkler system or the fire alarm system maintained. So what we do is a shell building, and we assign the fire protection systems, the dialer, the sprinkler system, and the fire alarm system. We assign that to the responsible companies that take care of those. That way we don't have to go bother the tenants about getting the system done. We know who's responsible for that. And then we have files. What we do, since we use iPads that have cameras on it when we're in the buildings, we take photographs of all the fire alarm panels, all the sprinkler risers, and the calc plates, so that we have those for future reference. Now if you go back and you look at a Native New Yorker, for example, which is a restaurant in that strip mall, we can see separately who those contacts are. So if we identify a fire code issue or a complaint or whatever, we don't have to go bother the property management company. We know who directly to go to. And we can also look at their systems, and they have a wet chemical system in their restaurant that they're responsible for maintaining. So this has really helped us when going from chaos to compliance, just breaking down these buildings and identifying who's responsible for what system and getting their information in the contact module here has helped us get compliance, because we can do a lot of our work by email or phone calls sitting in the office without spending the time driving somewhere and tracking down who's responsible for what. So over the years we've been able to develop that great database that's identified every system in the city and who's responsible for maintaining it. and that makes your program much more effective in getting compliance. We'll switch back to let me go over to this retail complex, for example. So this here is the complex. So we have all the contact information for who takes care of all these fire hydrants, which is right here. We have their contact information there. So if it's a fire hydrant issue, we take care of them. All these buildings, the building shells are in the back. We know who's responsible for those, and all the individual pads in the restaurants up here, we have who's responsible for them, who's responsible for the systems in here. Now, the other key thing is having this hydrant available on the map shows us, for example, all the yellow ones haven't been tested yet. All the blue ones have tested and passed. So if for visual data, if you're an inspector and you bring that up and you look and you see a red fire hydrant here and it's close to a yellow Harkins theater that holds 4,000 people, that should send a big red flag up that you need to go find out what's the matter with that fire hydrant. Why is it red and everything else is blue that's been tested in there? So that's another example of what our inspectors call street smart. By having this visual representation on a Google map, it makes them more effective when they're in the neighborhood. They can look at things like that. Or when they're doing a flow test and they see that one turns out red and the one all of them around it are blue, that should send up a red flag that there's probably a closed valve somewhere. And that's one thing, since we've got all these details now that we're finding more and more of, is that these are all private water systems inside the complex. So we're finding more and more valves turned off, which means there's no water for the hydrants and there's no water for the sprinkler systems. So we're emphasizing on our community risk reduction program. We're making a high priority to take care of the private water systems. So as you notice in your OVAP scores, we'll get rid of the hydrants here. For all of you that have the vision module, once you input all the data, like this Costco, for example, here, you input all the number of floors and the square footage and the occupant load and the distances and things like that. The regulatory oversight, construction type, the systems, the exiting. Then it gives it a score and it classifies it. So without the visual mapping, that would be really difficult for an inspector to go, how am I going to prioritize my inspections in this zone? So what we've done, they can see now that the yellow ones, the Costco, the sporting goods store, the theater, the tire store, are a higher hazard because of the whatever reasons, so that they need to place their focus on that. So if we go back to the grid view again here, this is where the type of occupancy is pretty much right out of the building code for this one here. But our zones, what we did is we started off just having a north zone and a south zone for the inspectors, and we realized that demographic information from the census tracts was very important for comparing to your fire profile, your EMS profile, or whatever. So we went back and actually reclassified. We have 22 census tracts in the city. So we reclassified and rezoned our city into the census tracts. So if you want to see zone number 1, then we actually went over to our finance department. We had a discussion with them about which ones bring in the most economic value, and we looked at some other factors. So this is zone 1. This is our highest priority zone in the city. It has 257 occupancies in it. And if we map it, we can see that it's over where this retail complex is. And so what Valerie, the inspector for this area, does is she spends January and February just in zone 1 taking care of all the inspections in zone 1. Well, how does she prioritize that? What she can do is go over to the reports module then, and we'll give you an example here. And she can bring up a 1132 report. And we'll put in the year 2015, and she can see all the inspections she's done in that zone for the whole year. And we'll go down to existing buildings here. Okay, here's the existing building, and as you can see, she's done 297 business inspections in there.
So, Roger?
Yes?
Brian had a question. He said, I'm still interested in knowing if each building would need its own occupancy created.
That's what we did, and we started doing that originally because the state fire marshal's office started requiring us to do that for all the schools. And at first we thought it was painful because we had to write up different inspection reports for each building. But then when we started looking at the data that we could be broken down by building, we realized that that was the way to go. And then when 1730 came along, they want you to do a building stock profile, which basically means you have to break it down for each building so that you can rate that building's risk versus the hazards and where it would fall on the priority for inspections and things like that.
Okay. And he also...
Hey, Roger, this is Bob.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in and answer Brian's question, and you're exactly right. Yes, to get a pin to show on the map, you have to have an occupancy for each individual building, and that will place the pin on the map. And you also, the second part of the question he asked is about the OVAP scoring, and that's part of the vision module. You would need to get the vision module and with mapping in order to see everything that Roger's doing here. So, thank you.
And in 1730,
sorry to interrupt, Roger. Go ahead.
No problem. And in 1730, once you gather all the data, then you have to analyze it and you have to grade them and prioritize them. So basically, this is the only software program I know of that with this vision product that actually does that for you, because you're collecting all that information for your pre-plan stuff anyway. So it uses the old RAVE system to classify it and to color code it on the visual map. So it does a lot of the work for you that 1730 is requiring in the future, and it gives it to you visually and gives you detailed reports so that you can prioritize your inspections. Which ones get inspected annually, semi-annually, every 2 or 3 years. So it makes the work a lot easier. So and initially, I'm sure all of you are thinking, oh, that's a lot of work to do each building, and that was my initial thought also. But once you see the benefit of doing that, it'll actually help you manage all your program for prioritizing the inspections and the risk, but also for identifying who the contacts are, who's responsible, where the systems are, because now we basically have a good relationship with most of the people because we've identified them. We can email them, we can call them, they get stuff done just because of the details that we get out of emergency reporting. And then let me go to the move away from census zones here and go over to fire station zones. And in Avondale, we have 4 fire stations, so we can, if we want to see all the occupancies in Fire Station 171's district, we can see that they have, I'm scrolling down here real quick, 703 occupancies in their fire station zone. And if you want to map that, you can see that's their fire station zone. We're basically divided by the interstate north and south and by a riverbed east and west. So this is Station 1, Station 3, Station 4, and Station 2. So when you go back to the grid, here's how you can start being a data ninja. You can actually start mixing it up here. And Valerie, for example, can say, okay, I want to know all the large restaurants that I'm responsible for. And there would be 41 of them. And there she says, I want to be able to map those and see where they're at. Well, she can see exactly where they are. They're made in the business corridors there. Or if you want to go back and say, I want to see all the churches. If Jesse wants to see all the churches in his district, he can see that there's 32. He can map up them if they want to know for some reason if there's a lot of church fires or something. The fire station zone, churches in the fire station 173 zone that Jesse inspects. There's 9 of them, and you can see exactly where they are on the map. And switch over to satellite if you want. You can see quite a few of them are yellow, higher hazard because they don't have sprinkler systems or fire alarm systems. They're all older ones. So you can see it becomes very flexible, and that's why I would recommend you place a high priority on building your grid, because again, that gives you the mapping capabilities where the reports don't give you the mapping capabilities. So the more time you put in on the front end of building this grid to fit your needs, then the better data you can get out of the back of it. For example, in the nail salons here, I'm going to do real quick just as an example. We had several complaints about the smell in nail salons, that it's a hazard, health hazard, that they need more ventilation. So we can immediately just bring up, we have 19 nail salons in town. We can say, okay, Jesse, you go check your 7, and Valerie, you go check your 12, and see if there's a problem with ventilation, see if the building department needs to require more building ventilation. So it's that simple when you've taken the time to build this database the way that you want. Then just about any issue that comes up, you can slice and dice it to help you manage it effectively and get a lot better compliance. Okay, here's, let me go back to the zones real quick. Here's one of the reports that the inspectors love. Like Valerie's trying to figure, is at the end of the year now, so she's figuring out which inspections she missed that she needs to go back and take care of. So she can go to report 836, and she can say, tell me all the inspections in zone 1 for this year, 2015, that I've missed that I need to look at to go back to. So she can see here, oh, she missed a garage in one of the apartment complexes, and most of the rest of these are cell sites, and are water sites that she doesn't inspect, or they're vacant facilities. So basically, she could go back and catch that garage to close out the year, get the Costco fuel station, which is scheduled for this month, and then she knows she's done with that zone and she's met her goals for the year in that zone. So this is a real valuable tool, rather than they're trying to figure out. When we were in chaos, we'd go, oh, we don't know what we've inspected, we don't know what we haven't inspected, we don't know what we should have inspected and we didn't, or what we wasted our time on that we should have been using a higher priority, where this has allowed us to actually manage our whole program. This is the first time in the 30 years I've been in fire prevention that I've actually had accurate, good data to be able to manage the program proactively and feel good about that we're using our limited resources in the right way to serve our community and make it safer. And then let me do the advanced search here real quick. So if you go back to your grid, we'll get rid of some of this information here. And say Valerie wants to know, she wants to do an advanced search, and this is from the grid, and she wants to know, say she didn't have time to do all the restaurants, so she wants to do the larger restaurants that have a square footage of over 5,000 square feet and has an OVAP score over 30, so that she can at least get the ones that are the bigger ones there and the higher hazard ones. So she'd see that these 11 here are the ones that she would need to focus on in her area, and then she just clicks on the map button and she knows immediately where they are. And she can do this from her iPad in the field. She can say, oh, which ones have I missed or which ones do I need to prioritize on? And that way she's using the community risk reduction concept of prioritizing the higher risk. So you can clear your search parameters and basically build a lot of data just out of that search program. So Tom also wanted me to show you our inspection form real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to our test facility, and we're going to do an existing building inspection. And what we've done is we've built, over the years, we've built a consistent form for existing buildings. And the advantage to this is it makes our inspections consistent. We're all looking at the same things we identified based on our local needs and what our local hazards are, what the priorities are for what we want to look at in an inspection. And we've also identified, using this form, a systematic way to do the inspection. So up here I have general comments, like if there's no violations, we would click a note here, because a lot of people have to have that saying that there was an inspection and there was no violations. And then we start outside. We basically go a few minutes early and either drive around or walk around, depending on how big the complex is, and look at all the fire access issues. And what we've done in here is our old program just basically cited the fire code, which people didn't understand, so they didn't correct anything, and we didn't get compliance. So what we did in this concept is we used clear, precise language to communicate to the people exactly what the violation is and what they need to do. And then in here it cites the actual code reference. So we were telling them here to provide address numbers, blah, 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 and then it tells them why it's needed in there with the code reference. Then the inspectors can make any comments they want, and they can shoot a photo with their iPads. So we get a lot better compliance because the people can understand the wording that we've used. They can see the code reference if they want it. They have notes from the inspector, and they have a photograph, and they get this by email in PDF format. So then if they need approval, they can just forward that email to whoever approves the money to fix whatever the fire code violation is. And that person can usually understand it without having to ask a lot of questions because of what we just talked about. So we're finding that we get a lot more compliance now with this new inspection form than we've ever got before, just because it simplifies it for the person and makes it easier for them to understand. And then what they do is they look at the fire hydrant system, and here's all the common fire hydrant related fire code violations. Then they look at the exterior of the building, combustible storage, gas meter, vehicular protection, things like that. And then they go in and introduce themselves, and they sit down and they go over all the paperwork. And here's all the common type of paperwork: fire hydrant, fire sprinkler, fire alarm, in priorities, the way we usually see them. Off-site monitoring, kitchen hoods, fire pumps, fire doors, smoke and heat, elevators, refrigeration. And then down into emergency procedures, then kitchen fire safety plan, apartment guide. And again, these are based on our fire profile, that these are high priorities. So we want them to have a plan to elevators. So basically it makes it easy for the inspector, because in any of these things that they don't have, they just check a button, check the thing in box, and hit a button on their iPads, and it's done. Then we get into the fire sprinkler systems, the next priority, and here's all the common hazards that are fire code violations that we see with sprinkler systems. Then the next priority is the fire alarm systems. They look at it, and here's all the common fire code violations here. Then fire extinguishers. And exiting, exit lighting, and the common electrical issues. Then we found this is one of the most frequently violations that we write up. It's extension cords and power taps. So since the code broke those apart, we actually broke those apart so that extension cords are a separate section from power taps. And the other thing we've done is taken stock photos that we've taken of how to do it right, and we keep those in our gallery in our iPads. So if we want to show somebody the proper type of power tap to buy, we not only put a photo of their bad one in there, but we also paste a photo of what they should buy right next to it so that they know the proper type of power tap to go buy. And we do this with signs, and we've built up a fairly good library that we keep in the iPads to help people, and that just educates them, and that helps them do the correction right the first time. Then we get into fire resistive construction, interior storage, flammable and combustible liquids, and all the ones at the bottom are the least written ones, so we don't want the inspectors to have to scroll down here unless they absolutely need them. Then we have a special section for motor fuel dispensing operations, hazardous materials, swimming pools. And being in Arizona, we have a lot of swimming pools, and so here's all the swimming pool issues. Propane, and whether it's inside exchange cages, outdoor dispensing, and compressed gases, medical gases, welding operations. Then again, we mentioned that our fire profile showed that kitchen fires and restaurant fires were a high priority, so we identified all the fire code issues that need to be addressed in kitchens of commercial kitchens. We broke it down by the hood and duct system, the suppression system, the cooking appliances. Then we get into assembly, occupancies, interior finish. Then here's referrals, like if they need to refer them to the building department. Just click that box, and it already has the name and the phone contact information for the building official, the public works, whatever we need. And then here's stop work orders and stop use orders and fire watch orders. So basically, this is a toolkit that 99% of anything that an inspector would need in the field is already built into this checklist, and they can just, on their iPad, click a couple buttons and take care of the issue and be a lot more productive, fast, and efficient. So I think I'll end this here and take any questions that anybody might have. I know that's a very long inspection report, but it's actually very simple to use, and we designed it and tested it on the iPads where all the most common stuff is near the top. And so the inspectors can just flick across the screen and scroll real fast, and they know right where the sections are because they've done so many inspections. So it's really fast and efficient to use, even though it looks long and complex and overwhelming.
Okay, Roger, this is Bob again. I see Marcella has a question. She asked, does your agency provide mobile internet signal on the iPads? I'm also new to my agency, and I find that a lot of things ER can do we have on iPads for easy access, since we do not provide a signal for them.
Right, ours
have it built in. Do you guys use hotspots in the field, or?
No, we have it built into the iPad, and they offer a special, we use Verizon, which offers a special rate to public safety, so it's unlimited data for a fixed cost. Now in the fire engines, they have hotspots in each fire engine for their EMS stuff, but we have it built into the iPad.
All right, Marcella, hopefully you got that answer there. Now Ruben has a question. How did you establish your WUI occupancy? Was this a zonal in nature, or did you include CWPP components? I hope you know what he's asking there.
No, I'm sorry, I don't. Is that the critical infrastructure?
I don't know, Ruben, you might want to ask that again and without using the abbreviations, because I'm not familiar with some of those. Wildland urban interface occupancy.
Oh.
That's the WUI.
Yeah, we don't really have that issue because we're in the desert. So in our particular location, that's not an issue. So we haven't built that into ours.
I'm sure we can come up with a way to figure out that. Okay, Brian Kelly's asking, how and what program are you using for pre-plans, and how do they link them?
Actually, we're using the tab in the emergency reporting.
Yeah, what we find most people do, they use the pre-plan tab here, and they will use like a separate drawing program or something to draw up their floor plans and site plans, and then just attach those as either PDF documents or a picture file.
Oh, right. And a good example is the this college campus, for example, under the file here. And we do all this on our iPad. This is the whole campus with all the fire alarm panels, the FDCs. The blue line is the private water system lines and all the hydrants, so gas lines, electric.
Yeah, good. So that's a great idea. Brian Falls asks, how do you handle the Phoenix NASCAR race?
Oh, well, that's a good one right there. We basically, when we go back to occupancies, we have a category and subcategory of all the PR. You can see all the stuff they have at PR. They have permanent buildings, grandstands, temporary fire protection, fireworks, fueling operations, concession stands, tents. So what we do is, so you can see out at PIR, there's 80 facilities that we take care of just out there. And we'll go over to the map here. So most of these are temporary ones that they set up. So that's basically what our map of PIR looks like. And we used to take volumes of paper and books down there to do the races. Now we just take our iPads and emergency reporting. We manage the whole week just from iPads and document all the inspections and everything we do at the track. You know, like this one here, for example, is the Xfinity garage that they set up. You know, medical facilities, fueling operations. Here's an example of a tent here, a big tent.
Yeah, actually, I got to go down with Roger last fall at the race, and they've got that place pretty well wired with all the occupancies and stuff there. So they,
yeah, and the other thing we do is
do a great job.
Like we have the floor plans for each one of the tents. We take photographs of all the stuff so we can compare it year to year. So again, that used 10 years ago, that was chaos working those races, and now it's just compliance and as easy as you can make it with a lot going on, just with 3 of us on an iPad. We used to have 7 or 8 inspectors out there and couldn't keep up, and now 3 of us with iPads and emergency reporting keep up with that.
All right, cool. Well, we're out of time. Ruben, I'd like to get back with your question. I see he's actually left the meeting already. We didn't get to answer him. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan was the other part of his thing that he asked there. Another question from Brian Kelly is, when using the iPad, is there a way to record the lat and long to keep from having to manually drop pins?
We've found it's easier just to drop the pin, and then it identifies the lat and long. Because like we'll stand there right by fire hydrants, we'll stand right there by it and drop it. That's the most accurate way to get it.
Okay.
But you can manually enter it though, but you'd have to use something else. Like here's the lat and long here.
Yeah, if you did even just the basic, the like 33.4 and minus 112.3, that'll get you in the ballpark. And then you can use the move feature to put the pin exactly where you want it.
Right.
All right, well, we're out of time. Roger, I really appreciate you doing this today.
You're welcome.
You did a great job. I'm sorry I couldn't join you right at the beginning, but love the way you're using the system, and very glad that it's helped you in Avondale. And a solution
We
for
appreciate
you.
it's an awesome tool to help us manage our community safeties.
Thank you, Roger. Everyone, next Virtual Thursday is in 2 weeks on Thursday. It'll be the year in review, the best of 2015 on December 17th. So we hope to see you there.
All right. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks.